The spokesperson for the opposition, Ferial Clark, please.
Thank you, Sir Roger. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I want to thank the Honourable Member for Carl Sholton and Wallington for bringing this debate on behalf of the Petitions Committee. As we've heard, Sir Roger, despite Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva, or FOP, being a ultra-rare disease affecting only 1 in a million, over 111,000 people have signed this petition, including 162 people from his constituency and 108 from my own, showing the high level of public support for this issue. I also want to pay tribute to the contributions from the Right Honourable Member for Hemel Hempstead, whose constituent Lexi has recently been diagnosed with FOP, and to Lexi's mother, Alex, and father Day, who have been instrumental in the petition's success, while also raising money for research themselves and raising awareness. I was pleased to see that there were signatures from all across the country, but the support in Hemel Hempstead massively outweighed anywhere else, evidencing the incredible drive and leadership that has been shown on Lexi's behalf. And I want to pay tribute to the Right Honourable Member for Hemel Hempstead. The Right Honourable Member highlighted, as have colleagues from who have spoken today, have all highlighted the issues around the lack of funding and the need to raise awareness. I also want to pay tribute to we had lots of excellent contributions, so I want to pay tribute to the member for Wavenshaw and Sale East, the member for North Atrium, member for South West Bedfordshire, for highlighting the cases of their constituents, but also highlighting the issues around funding and the lack of awareness. And it is incredibly shocking that the only source of funding for the research into this disease is from the Friends of FOP Friends. So also want to recognise the work they have done and thank them as well. As we have heard, FOP comes from a mutation of the ACVR1 gene, causing muscles, tendons and ligaments to convert to unwanted bone growth, starting from very young age, where it debilitates and disables before ultimately progressing to immobility and ultimately death. While progress happens at different rates, both naturally and due to trauma, which it induces itself, most people with FOP are immobile by the age of 30, and the average, of course, yes.
On the way for her generosity. I think she's touched on an enormously important point that I didn't touch on in my comments. Lots of people think this is all about trauma. This is all about bruising or impact, but actually, for a lot of people that have this terrible, terrible condition, there's no logic, there's no trauma, it just develops and goes through. So you've got the two sides of it. Trauma, yes, and that's where the research, I think, is so important into this particular condition.
Thank you. I absolutely agree, and there's absolutely need for research and investment into research of all aspects of this illness. I just wanted to add that the shocking life expectancy for people with FOP is on average is 40 years. That is absolutely shocking. It is an absolutely horrible condition that nobody would wish upon their worst enemy. And as such, it is clear that we are all in agreement in the need to act to improve outcomes for the approximately 70 people in the UK that we know of at the moment, and everyone living with it across the world who are suffering. Thankfully, we know that action can be effective both in diagnosis and care. On diagnosis, the average age is 8 years old, despite the existence of genetic tests to confirm diagnosis as well as other signs far earlier than that. Usually the benefits of early diagnosis are common sense. It is just a matter of time. Time spent untreated is time that a disease or condition can worsen without treatment. But FOP is different. As I mentioned earlier, and other members have also mentioned, trauma generates FOP activity and worsening the condition and speeding up its progress. And any time spent undiagnosed, as I said, is time where trauma will occur unknowingly, not least in young children who are not only particularly robust, but also not particularly careful. I have a 7-month-old myself, and I know it's really difficult to stop little babies from actually moving around. So we don't need to stretch our mind to imagine the accidental trauma that could take place up to the age of 8 in a child with FOP. In the first instance, early diagnosis avoids investigative and diagnostic procedures that can themselves trigger irreversible FOP activity in this individual. But it doesn't stop there. Early diagnosis means other adaptive adaptations can be made at home and at school, as we've heard from my honourable friend for Wythenshawe and Sale East, the adaptations that have been made for Oliver in the school, and using alternatives for potential damaging immunisations, usually injected into muscle, establishing knowledgeable clinical care. And of course, simple behavioural changes to avoid unnecessary trauma in these individuals. These simple things can make a tremendous difference. Yet the genetic test, which can make this happen, can only be requested by specialist clinicians, of which there aren't many. Given how few people suffer from FOP too, the likelihood of this happening prior to a diagnosis seems monumentally low, let alone at the optimal time. The directory of approved tests for the NHS Genomics Medicine Service will be updated next April. And we've heard already the honourable members call for the government to ensure that FOP is included in this. I hope to hear the Minister commit to heeding these calls shortly. I would also urge the Minister to explore other avenues too, whether technology that improves doctors' awareness of symptoms of newborn genetic screening, which will impact far beyond FOP and help many of the 1 in 17 people who live with a rare condition. The government has already set out its vision for this in the rare diseases framework, as we heard earlier from other honourable members. So I don't think anything new is being asked of today, simply for them to follow through on its promises. And while diagnosis is, as is often the case, especially with rare diseases where the difference can be made, improving standards of care for those living with FOP can also be transformation, as we've heard from other members too. With so few specialists or experienced clinicians, it is of no surprise that the levels of care vary. But that doesn't mean that this is a status quo that has to be maintained. The nature of FOP means that some activity needs urgent action, and of course, specialist assistance is needed throughout. The rare diseases framework offers an opportunity here too. So I would be keen to hear from the Minister what plans the government has to improve care for those with FOP universally throughout this mechanism and ensure that all those living with it now and in the future get the care that they need. And my final point is a broader one, Sir Gail. That applies to rare diseases in general. We have many of these debates, and quite rightly, as every person who lives with a rare disease has a different experience, but collectively they affect us as many as 3.5 million people across the UK. While individual approaches are needed, a collective approach is also important, and I welcomed the publication of the Rare Diseases Framework. Not only can collective action help improve the standards of diagnosis, treatment and care, but individual approaches can help others. For example, increased research into FOP, as we've heard today, could help joint replacements, military injuries, burns, supporting injuries, osteoporosis, heart disease, chronic anemia, and even brain cancers. And this principle will apply across the rare diseases spectrum. So it is disappointing that after the Rare Diseases Framework was published, the then Public Health Minister confirmed that there was no new funding allocated. So my ask of the Minister and my question of the Government is very simple. How then will the Minister deliver the priorities they have set out in this framework? Thank you, Sir Roger.